Today's reading is by Reverend David Breeden. There's no package called hope, nothing at a shop to look for. Hope won't store like hay in a barn. It is the last leaf on a branch in deep winter. It is a singular thing from which it's found, a hand reached out. Hope is fine-grained, like lavender gone to seed. Gossamer, a moth's wings. There's no weight called hope. It's a hand, a whisper, a moment shared, nearly not there, but like a shadow, there all the same. I'm Connie Pursell, and as you know, our theme for December has been kindness, and Dave has reminded us of that, as has Rob. And Reverend Kent sometimes reminds us that it's a good idea to share our stories with one another because it is by hearing the stories that we get to know one another better. So I'm going to share some stories about kindness that have affected me personally. Of course, there have been a lot of acts of kindness this season among ordinary people, especially during this pandemic, and then again through the holiday season. And you've seen some of these acts on television and on social media, as well as toy drives and restaurant owners feeding individuals without homes. And there have been acts of kindness by Tapestry members with food drives, clothing drives, and a lot of outreach to our unhoused neighbors to provide warm clothing for this time of year. And there have been many donations of gift cards. In the recent past, many of our members have paid visits to immigrants in detention, bringing some human companionship into a difficult and sometimes long confinement. And our caring committee has reached out many times during this pandemic to keep tabs on the welfare of our various members, all acts of kindness. A couple of years ago, Tapestry members helped deliver meals to me when I had a total knee replacement surgery. Julia Ramponi spent the night at my house the first night I was home from the hospital. Joan Siegel brought me a casserole. Kathy Spahn helped with some minor medical follow-up when I was just getting home. Celia Young brought me some tacos. Lynn Cowan's daughter, Leah, went to the pharmacy for me and picked up some prescriptions. And Carol Semmelroth came by and dropped off a few things. These are just a few of the acts of kindnesses during that time that I greatly appreciated. By now, you probably realize, and I believe Dave mentioned it also, various acts of kindness in the greater community, a lot of these, as you do them yourself, you get the benefit as the doer, the giver, in addition to what it does for the receiver. Looking back over the years, I remember several specific acts of kindness performed on my behalf. Some acts of kindness can have an impact on your courses of action, even the course of your life. One that I remember well came from a professor at Cal State Long Beach way back in the 1960s. And he planted the notion in my head to get a master's degree in English. He inquired about my continuing on with graduate courses just as I was about to get my BA. And I replied that I wasn't planning on going any further, that I had to get a job. And he responded by telling me I had to go on with graduate classes. Honestly, I wasn't sure I was smart enough to do the coursework required, but he insisted that I was. And so I was so surprised by his interest and his insistence and encouragement that I did go on to get a master's degree, taking night classes over the next 6 years while I worked full-time during the days, which was the only way I could manage it financially. I always think of his act of kindness. Without his prodding, I wouldn't have pursued a master's degree. His nudging changed the course of my education. In 1988, I encountered a very kind tour guide. I was on a trip to Europe. The tour guide's name was Nick. and he was patient and kind to one of the group members who had a severe disability and honestly shouldn't have been traveling. She had multiple sclerosis with severe symptoms and was confused. She often lost her balance. She spilled coffee and water. She often overslept and missed breakfast, and sometimes she was late for the bus departure. Instead of sending her home, which Nick had every right to do, he helped her along, sometimes picking her up when she fell, and with the help of the bus driver, carrying her back to the bus. He even went to her room a couple of times when she overslept and helped her pack on a couple of occasions. Once we stopped in Monte Carlo and Carol wanted to buy a souvenir t-shirt. She had all her money mixed up. This was before the euro came into use, and she had Dutch guilders and francs and Deutschmarks and Italian lira all together at the bottom of a large carpet bag type carry-all, and it was a mess. She couldn't figure out what currency she needed. Nick helped her sort it all out, and when he was all done, and she was a little bit short of the needed amount, he chipped in the balance out of his own pocket. She seemed unaware and didn't thank him. We were just a day away from the final farewell dinner, which we were going to enjoy in Paris, and we would celebrate and share all our thoughts on what we'd enjoyed the most during the tour. And Nick met with the rest of the group and told us that everyone had signed up for the farewell dinner except Carol, the disabled lady. He told us she had exhausted all her funds. But, he continued, if we each contributed $1 American, she would be able to join the rest of us. Everyone was moved to generosity and gave $1 willingly. And she did join us. Again, I don't think she had any idea how that had been arranged. I, along with my fellow travelers, was impressed by Nick's many acts of kindnesses to her during that 2-week period. Another story. Once, many years ago, my mother was in the hospital and had just had a major surgery, and for the first few days after the surgery, she was in ICU. She was in her 80s at the time. I stayed at the hospital for long hours on those early days in the visitor waiting room outside the ICU, and I would go in for a brief visit every hour or so, just for a short time, observing their strict rules for visitors. At the time, I honestly thought she wasn't going to make it, and luckily it turned out that she did live several more years. But I was waiting outside the ICU, and there were several other people from another family waiting there as well. And they also had a relative who was confined. At one point, one of them went out for an ice cream run and came back with several individual servings of ice cream in small cups and gave me one too. It was a small gesture, but at the time it meant a lot to me. Another example of a small act of kindness. When my mother did finally die, a few years later in 1998, 2 of my insurance industry friends, named Karen and Kathy, came to her funeral. They did not know her, but they came to support me. One of them lived in Palm Springs, one in La Crescenta. They had at least a 2-hour drive to Lancaster, and of course a 2-hour drive back. They went out of their way to render another act of kindness. Greatly appreciated. Not too long ago, when I was still working in Long Beach, I ran out of gas on the way to work on a busy surface street, and it was raining. Thankfully, it wasn't on the freeway. It shouldn't have happened, but I guess I wasn't paying close attention to the fuel gauge. I managed to coast over to the far right out of traffic as far as I could. I put on my flashers and I grabbed my cell phone to call the auto club. About this time, a policeman showed up at my window to see if I needed help. I told him I had run out of gas, sorry about that, and that I was calling AAA. But I asked him to push me a little farther to the right just to make sure I wouldn't get clipped by the busy traffic, which he did. Once I was completely away from the traffic, it was just a matter of waiting. I told him I was fine, that the auto club was on its way, but he said he'd wait until the auto club truck arrived. He waited in his patrol car. That was an act of kindness, as he really didn't need to stay any longer, but he did. I appreciated it because it made me feel a little bit safer. The event ended fine. The auto club brought me enough gas to go down the street to a gas station and fill up. And I'll finish this presentation with a story that has a rather different ending. Back in the early 2000s, I was friends with a man named Harv. We did a few things together socially over a period of years, occasionally having dinner or lunch and going to professional and social events related to the insurance claims industry, which we were both part of, even though we had different employers. We saw each other at various industry conferences. After some time passed, I realized that his feelings for me were stronger than my feelings for him. And let's just say things got complicated. So I started putting distance between us and saw less of him, although our paths continued to cross now and then. Some years later, and somewhat out of the blue, I got a call from him and he told me he was in the hospital. He had had a heart attack. A complicating factor to his health and to our friendship was his alcoholism. Though he had several years of sobriety while I knew him, he had begun drinking again, and the many years of drinking had taken an additional toll on his health. The heart attack was the latest consequence. He asked me if I would come and visit him. I don't recall my exact response, but I waffled. I did not go visit him. I knew if I visited him, it would be awkward and I would have a very hard time finding the right words. I wasn't good in these kinds of situations, so I took the easy way out. Not so kind. Some more months went by, and in 2011, I learned that he was again hospitalized, this time with more serious health problems, again exacerbated by his drinking. Some mutual friends visited him and told me his condition was worse, and they passed along another of his requests that I come to visit him. I didn't go. Finally, at the end of January 2012, I got an email from another friend named Joe, a mutual friend, and he gave us, several of us, an update on Harv's condition. He wrote, "I wish I had better news about Harv. He just came home from the hospital after a lengthy stay. His health was compromised by strokes, and now he's in kidney failure. He has decided to discontinue dialysis and rest at home under hospice care. Now would be the best time for his friends and colleagues to say a prayer, send a card, keep him in their thoughts. There will also be an open house at his place tomorrow at noon for visitors to come and celebrate the good times and enjoy his company. Since it is such short notice, can you help me get the word out?" Once again, I did notify several insurance industry colleagues who knew Harv. I let them know about this visitation event, though I did not visit him myself. He died a few days later. I did attend his funeral at Rose Hills Memorial Park. The point of my sharing this final story about Harv is this. I had several opportunities to do something kind on his behalf, but I chose the easy way out so I wouldn't have to be in an awkward situation, uncomfortable with a loss for the right words. In the final analysis, I'm not sure I feel guilty, but I do have some regrets. If I had it to do over again, I certainly might act differently. So I hope my little stories, my little vignettes, have given you some food for thought. You never know when some circumstance or situation might arise where kindness is called for, where it can make some small but significant difference to a person in need. And when that happens in your life, may you do the right thing. May you be moved to kindness and generosity. Namaste, blessed be, shalom, and amen.